Well, let's bring in Chris Doyle. He's the director of the Council for Arab-British Understanding. Joins us now from London. Good to have you with us. What do you make of the UK's argument today? Did it have any visible impact on the court?
It's hard to know what the judges will make of that, but this is very much typical of a long-standing British position, I'm afraid, that wants to see international law shifted aside solely in favour of political negotiations, albeit there aren't any to speak of at the moment between Israel and the Palestinians. It treats this conflict as if it is one of two equal parties, Israel and Palestine, living side by side, who have to work out differences, whereas what the court is being asked is to determine, after 56 and a half years of protracted Israeli military occupation, whether what is meant to be temporary, the occupation, should come to an end. What it seems that Britain is more interested in, and the United States as well, is some sort of permanent process of negotiations, as opposed to the permanent process of occupation that is currently in play. And it's really difficult to understand what Britain wants from the Palestinians. They have an Israeli government, and indeed previous Israeli governments going back some time now, that refuses to negotiate with the Palestinian side, that refuses to enter into meaningful negotiations. They object, and for good reason, to the use of violence, to the use of force. I think a lot of people can understand that, what would be achieved by that, given the asymmetry of power. So why does Britain and the United States block every legal avenue it can to try to redress the grave injustices that are going on? And that is what people can't understand. It's why Britain and the United States, their reputations across the globe, frankly, are being trashed and undermined by our inaction.
On that last point you mentioned, how much of a minority are countries like the UK and the US in right now, as we hear more and more countries state the opposite perspective?
Well, when the UN General Assembly requested this opinion from the International Court of Justice, it was very clear that we're in a very small minority, and that most states believe that it's a perfectly proper thing for the court to render an opinion on whether, after 56 years, this occupation is actually illegal. And remember, it's very similar to the discussions we've had on the International Criminal Court, where at various points Britain has also objected to the court getting involved in crimes that may have been committed in Palestine. We've also seen this on a number of occasions, even at the Security Council as well, where they have been reluctant to support a draft resolution that would have put the onus on Israel to actually uphold its obligations. In fact, what we have seen throughout the last 4.5 months is that Britain and the United States just do not ever criticize Israel on the basis that it has violated international law, even though that's really explicit. So this reluctance is putting us in the minority, and it's causing a lot of people to say, what about the double standards here? Because when it was Russia invading Ukraine, when it was Russia occupying Crimea and parts of eastern Ukraine, the European Union, Britain, United States, all imposed sanctions. They disinvested. Their companies no longer did business with Russia. They took all the actions that Palestinians have been demanding for years, if not decades. And yet when it comes to the Palestinians, we have a British government that actually is trying to enact legislation right now to prevent public bodies in the United Kingdom from taking out policies to disinvest from Israel and the occupied territories. Is shameful.
All right. Briefly, does the UK have a reason to fear the ICJ becoming more and more involved in this, because it worries it might be found, or the groundwork might be laid for it to later be found complicit in the occupation?
That is a real fear, because Britain has been assisting in the arming of Israel. It has been Israeli planes that have been dropping these bombs, largely American ones, but there's been British arms that have been involved, British kit. So yes, the charge of complicity is one that will be brought, I think, in British courts as well as other venues. And letters have been sent to the Prime Minister, the leader of the British opposition, on exactly this point. So they should be concerned if they continue this same position.
All right, thanks so much. Good to get your analysis on that. Chris Doyle. Well, let's bring in Marwan Bashar, Al Jazeera.